I was going to ask, are we ready? But I think that's superfluous. Good afternoon. First, to observe, Attorney General Barr appears to have shown an unsettling willingness to undermine his own department in order to protect President Trump. Barr's words and actions suggest he has been disingenuous and misleading in saying the president is clear of wrongdoing. Attorney General Barr's letter summarizing the report from March 24th quoted the Special Counsel report, quote, "While this report does not conclude that the president committed the crime, it also does not exonerate him." He ignored what is in the Mueller report just 2 sentences before, where the Special Counsel concluded that, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would state so. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment." Obviously, this changes the emphasis and meaning of the paragraph, and obviously he didn't include the key sentences. Second, Special Counsel Mueller went on to say that, quote, "A thorough FBI investigation would uncover facts about the campaign and the president personally that the president could have understood to be crimes or that would have risen to personal and political concerns," close quote. For some reason, Attorney General Barr excluded this critical finding as well from his version of events. The Attorney General's decision to withhold the full report from Congress is regrettable, but no longer surprising. Barr has so far refused to work with the committee to provide us with information, the kind of information that has been customarily provided in the past and to which the Judiciary Committee is entitled. These concerns and many others will be addressed when Barr testifies before the committee on May 2nd. Even in its incomplete form, however, the Mueller report, incomplete because part of it is redacted, even in its incomplete form, however, the Mueller report outlines disturbing evidence that President Trump engaged in obstruction of justice and other misconduct. Contrary to the Attorney General's statement this morning that the White House, quote, "fully cooperated," unquote, with the investigation, the report makes clear that the president refused to be interviewed by the Special Counsel and refused to provide written answers to follow-up questions. Page 13 of Volume 2 makes clear that his associates destroyed evidence relevant to the Russian investigation. Page 10, Volume 1. The report concluded there was substantial evidence, in quotes, that President Trump attempted to prevent an investigation into his campaign and his own conduct. Page 76, page 78, page 90, page 157, Volume 2. That is why I have formally requested that Special Counsel Mueller testify before the House Judiciary Committee as soon as possible so we can get some answers to these critical questions, because we clearly can't believe what Attorney General Barr tells us. Finally, it is clear the Special Counsel's office conducted an incredibly thorough investigation in order to preserve the evidence for future investigators. The Special Counsel made clear that he did not exonerate the president, and the responsibility now falls to Congress to hold the president accountable for his actions. Congress must get the full, unredacted report along with the underlying evidence uncovered by Special Counsel Mueller. Congress requires this material in order to perform our constitutionally mandated responsibilities. Thank you. That's a statement. I'll answer some questions.
Congressman?
Yes.
When you say that it's Congress's responsibility to hold the president accountable, does that mean impeachment?
That's one possibility. There are others. We obviously have to get to the bottom of what happened and take whatever action seems necessary at that time. It's too early to reach those conclusions. It's one reason we wanted the Mueller report. We still want the Mueller report in its entirety, and we want other evidence too.
Congressman? Chairman, will Congress proceed with their own obstruction inquiries?
We will proceed with our inquiries. I mean, the first thing we will do is make sure we get the rest of the report and the underlying evidence. We will have Attorney General Barr testify in front of the Judiciary Committee on May 2nd. I anticipate that Mr. Mueller will testify sometime in the next couple of weeks after that, and we will probably hold a series of hearings on other aspects, and we'll see where we go from there.
If you choose to go toward impeachment, how important would this report be? Do you think this provides a roadmap?
Well, it's too early to talk about that, because we will have to go follow the evidence where it leads, and I don't know exactly where it will lead. If I did know, I wouldn't need all this information. But certainly, I think from the structure of the report, although I'm a little tentative because I've only skimmed it, we haven't had it very long, I think it was probably written with the intent of providing Congress a roadmap, as other reports have in the past, and but with a lot of the redactions and others, Attorney General Barr seems to be trying to frustrate that intent.
We'll take one more question.
Congressman, you said you wanted to hear from Mueller to better understand his findings. Based on what you've seen from the report, what specifically do you want to hear from Mueller about that you already don't have an understanding?
There are dozens of things we want to hear.
Just give me a few.
Well, for example, Barr says, or I don't remember where he said it, whether this is verbally or in one of his letters to us, he told us that the special prosecutor's determination that the president, that he wasn't going to indict the president on obstruction charges, had nothing to do with the Department of Justice doctrine or opinion that a sitting president is unindictable as a matter of law. There's a lot of material in the report that seems to indicate that that doctrine was considerably important. We'd want to get to the bottom of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Why didn't we come all this way?
Answer some questions, right? To wrap up, Elizabeth?
Good afternoon. I spent much of this morning, as you might imagine, as indeed I think many did around the country, reviewing the Mueller report or those sections of it that were not redacted. And I'd like to share with you some early observations from what I've been able to read so far. First, as we reported some time ago and as the intelligence community disclosed as well, there was an extensive campaign by the Russians to interfere in our elections in 2016. That interference took many forms, but most significantly it took the form of an effort through social media to divide the country, to push out favored narratives, to assist the Trump campaign on social media through a massive effort led by the Internet Research Agency out of St. Petersburg. It also embarked on an effort to hack and dump emails from the Democratic campaign of Hillary Clinton, from her campaign manager John Podesta, and other efforts through their hacking and dumping operation to influence the outcome in the election. These efforts, similar to the social media campaign, were designed to help one party, Donald Trump, and hurt another, Hillary Clinton. There were also efforts through any number of meetings between Russians and Trump campaign people to exert influence, a covert influence operation mounted by the Russians that continued during the campaign as well as after the campaign. And I want to make several points about these findings for what we can tell so far from the Mueller report. First, the Attorney General did a grave disservice to the country by misrepresenting significant parts of the Mueller report, by attempting to put a positive spin for the president on the special counsel's findings. The Attorney General is not the president's personal lawyer, although he may feel he is. He is supposed to be the highest law enforcement officer in the land, and he is supposed to represent the interests of the American people. But when the Attorney General gives the perception that the president fully cooperated in the investigation when he didn't, that they provided all the information materials when they didn't, when the president in fact deprived the special counsel of perhaps the single most important piece of evidence, that is his own verbal testimony, that misleads the American people. When the Attorney General represents on the obstruction case or suggests that the special counsel desired him to make that decision, that the special counsel wasn't mindful of the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that a special counsel cannot indict a sitting president when the Attorney General mischaracterizes the report in that way. He does a disservice to the country. A few things leap out about the substantive allegations on obstruction of justice and the issue of conspiracy. On the issue of obstruction of justice, the report outlines multiple attempts by the president to mislead the country, to interfere with the investigation, to make false statements to the American people, and to urge others to lie to the American people, to urge those of his staff to take actions to further obstruct the investigation, which may have been refused, but they were not refused owing to any goodwill or good motive on the president's part, far to the contrary. That these actions had a material impact on the investigation, that in fact the special counsel was deprived of information, or at least the timely access to that information as a result of things that the president did and said. It made our job, certainly in our committee doing our investigation, that much more difficult, as it did the special counsel's investigation. Those acts of obstruction of justice, whether they are criminal or not, are deeply alarming in the President of the United States. And it's clear that Special Counsel Mueller wanted the Congress to consider the repercussions and the consequences. It is clear the special counsel believed that no one was above the law, and that includes the President of the United States. The Attorney General's actions would make the President above the law, would make the President such that he cannot commit the crime of obstruction of justice. That was not the special counsel's view. If the special counsel, as he made clear, had found evidence exonerating the President, he would have said so. He did not. He left that issue to the Congress of the United States, and we will need to consider it. On the issue of conspiracy, and again in contrast to what the Attorney General represented, as I have said all along, each of the acts that I enumerated, each of the meetings, each of the contacts is not only spelled out in this report, corroborated in this report, but additional contacts and acts are also itemized. It gives us more information than the public knew about these illicit contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russians, whether they rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy or not. And contrary to what the Attorney General represented, the special counsel makes it clear he did not consider collusion, as that colloquial term is understood, but rather whether the facts amounted to the crime of conspiracy. And on that issue, in fact, in the case of the Trump Tower meeting, he found that while there was evidence, he could not establish two parts of the crime. That in fact Don Jr. did accept the offer of Russian help, but that he could not establish with admissible evidence either the willful intent by Kushner or Don Jr. or Manafort to violate the law, or that the material they received was sufficiently damaging to meet the statutory definition. That is a far cry from saying there is no evidence. That is the special counsel's determination that notwithstanding the evidence on this issue involving Trump Tower and other interactions, like the provision of polling data by Manafort, which we have learned today was far more ongoing than we knew, that the special counsel could not establish a criminal conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt and to the satisfaction of a jury. So these are the overall conclusions. But let me just say, to sum up, and then I'll be happy to go to your questions. As I said some time ago, whether these acts are criminal or not, whether the obstruction of justice was criminal or not, or whether these contacts were sufficiently illicit or not to rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy, they are unquestionably dishonest, unethical, immoral, and unpatriotic, and should be condemned by every American. That is not the subject of vindication. That is the subject of condemnation. And that is how I think we should view the Mueller report. And I'm happy to go to your questions.
Did the Mueller report adequately address all your questions regarding conspiracy or collusion, or do you have additional questions you hope will be answered by your committee?
There are sections certainly that are redacted in the report, some that clearly go to facts that are not being presented to the public, that would shed light on additional either illicit contacts or the nature of those contacts between the Russians and the Trump campaign. But other sections that are almost completely redacted go to the prosecutorial judgment. And that is when the special counsel looked at the evidence of conspiracy on these particular incidents, and in particular vis-a-vis WikiLeaks and the disclosure of that information, the contacts between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks, the sections on the exercise of that prosecutorial judgment, why the special counsel concluded what the counsel did, have been largely redacted. And we need to know that information. So we will be seeking the complete and unredacted report, again, so that we can do our proper oversight. One other matter that is very important to point out, and that is that, as the special counsel makes clear in the report, the counterintelligence findings are not completely included in this report. That in fact there were FBI agents embedded in the special counsel's team who were looking at the issue of compromise or counterintelligence, and that some of that information is not included. Others, of course, it may be included but redacted. Our committee, the Intelligence Committee, has requested that Mueller come and testify. We want to understand exactly what was found in terms of any counterintelligence efforts, any efforts by the Russians to make use of U.S. persons, particularly those affiliated with the Trump campaign, as witting or unwitting agents of the Russian government.
Chairman, the president tweeted out "game over." Is it game over? And has your opinion about articles changed at all as a result of what you read today?
Well, it's certainly not game over in the sense that there's a lot more that we need to know that's redacted in this report. And again, this report only goes to what is criminal or not criminal. Other actions that may have compromised the president or others around him may or may not be even included in the report. In the interest of making sure that our policy is driven by the best interests of the country and not by the personal or financial interests of the president or anyone around him, we need to find out the answers to that. But we will certainly be guided by the good investigative work that the special counsel has done. It is not our intention to redo all the painstaking work that the special counsel has conducted. Indeed, it wouldn't be possible for us to do so. The special counsel had at his access a bevy of FBI agents, subpoenas, grand juries, etc., that we do not have advantage of. This is one of the reasons why it's so important for the Congress to be able to obtain this information, so we do not have to recreate the wheel. But it is important to note that the facts that are now established by this report are damning. Whether they could or should have resulted in the indictment of the president or people around him, they are damning. And we should call for better from our elected officials. The standard cannot simply be that you can do anything you like as long as you can declare at the end of the day, I am not a crook. That is not the ethical standard the American people expect in their president.
Congressman Kellyanne Conway called for you to step down as chairman. She said he should produce the evidence he says he has. What do you say to that?
Well, Kellyanne Conway clearly hasn't read the report, because if she had, she would see that all the facts that I've been alluded to are not only spelled out, but they're spelled out in far greater detail than I have. But look, this is coming from someone who invented alternate facts, and apparently she is continuing to cling to her alternate facts.
Has Robert Mueller responded to your invitation to testify? Did you believe that the Attorney General should resign?
We've made two requests of the special counsel. First, we've made the request for the counterintelligence findings and the underlying evidence. And it's very important to understand that the Justice Department has a statutory obligation to provide us with counterintelligence or foreign intelligence. And so they're required to provide that. Now, some of that is documentary evidence, but we have also asked for his physical testimony. We have not received a response to that yet. But the Attorney General did say during his press conference today that he would not oppose that, and we will fully expect them to comply with both of those requests.
Barr resigning, is that?
In terms of Barr, look, I think he's done a deep disservice to the country, and frankly, he should have never been confirmed without committing to recusing himself from this entire investigation. As we all know, he applied for the job by writing a 19-page legal memo setting out why he thought an obstruction case against the president would not lie, that it was a bogus theory. And he made good on that job application in what he did today and what he has done thus far. So I think it was a grave error by the Senate to confirm him without requiring his recusal. In terms of beyond that, I don't want to comment.
And how would you describe your thoughts on the fact that the president did not sit for an interview now that you've read the report? Is that
a disservice as well, and where do you stand on that?
Well, it's certainly a disservice to the country and to getting to the bottom of the facts that the president was unwilling to do what he said he would. Not the first time the president has reneged on a commitment. It is one thing to ask for written answers to questions. You then get the lawyer's answers. You get Rudy Giuliani's answers or Jay Sekulo's answers. You don't get the president's answers. When you have the opportunity to interview someone in person, you have the opportunity to do follow-up questions and get to the truth. That was not allowed to happen. As I suspected, and I said while this was going on, I thought it was a mistake not to subpoena the president. But as I expected, the special counsel did set out his considerations, and I think foremost among them was the president would fight it, he would have to litigate it, and that would lengthen his investigation. But I think it means the American people were deprived of important information.
Forgive me, I got here a little bit late. If you've already asked this question, I understand. But if not, does what you saw today in this report rise to the level where impeachment should be considered?
We need to look at the full report. Certainly what Bob Mueller has revealed on the obstruction of justice issue is the most concerning, because that, of course, involves the president's own conduct, his own falsehoods to the American people, his efforts to get other people to tell lies, his effort to deter people from cooperating with the investigation, his effort to reward those who stuck to the party line, all of which, of course, Bill Barr conveniently ignored in his press conference today. All of that is damning conduct by the President of the United States. And I think we need some time to let this sink in and understand the full repercussions for the country of having a president who lies to the country, who misleads the country, who urges others to do so, and frequently on a daily basis, but most significantly when it concerns an investigation into Russian interference in our election. This was an attack on American sovereignty. This was an attack on American democracy, and that a president would not only not cooperate with it, but would tell repeated falsehoods and would not sit down and allow the special counsel to ask questions, would in Helsinki take the Vladimir Putin's word over his own intelligence agencies. All of that needs to be considered by the Congress and the country in terms of what it means about the President of the United States. Thank you.
Adam, can I ask
Thank you.
you a
That's all the
quick
time we
question?
have for it.
Adam,
Thank you so much.
can I ask you a quick question?
So I'm so sorry. Thank you. So we have time for it. We did say debating. We do just 4 questions. Thank you so much. And thank you for all your flexibility today. Thank you.